Hey folks, it's Jake here at Canadian Cutting Edge, and today we're taking a look at what's in this package. No, it's not Crown Royal, it is this. Actually, I don't know if Crown Royal is just mostly a Canadian thing or not. Anyhow, this is the 1808P. This is the lowest cost version of this knife. Excuse me. You can get this knife not only in G10, you can get it in 3D milled G10, a couple bucks more, carbon fiber, titanium frame lock version of the same knife. So this is by Artisan Cutleries. This is the ZUMWALT, is what the word name of it is, other than not just the model number. And I'd like to share it with you this morning. It's a bigger knife, just a little bit shy of 9 inches when the blade is totally deployed. And it's just outside of my main budget category. I guess March is the month where I'm going over a little bit on more of my videos than I usually do. I usually do really good, not really good. I usually do lower budget knives, usually often, $35 and less. And then often I go up to $50, not often, but not infrequently, I go up to $50. And then there's a few times I go up over $50 US. This one's just a little bit over $50 US, not much. And if you can get it with the discount code and stuff, you might get it for less than 50. Let me double check here. Yeah, this thing's like $52.49. At White Moutain Knives, you can get 10% off, and then it's under the $50. So yeah, that could be in there. So if you want to watch this review, stick around. If you're watching on Monday morning, what would that be, the 26th or whatever of March, the last Monday of March, then do go back and check out my origin story video. You have to do it before Tuesday morning, Mountain Standard Time. Trust me, if you haven't seen it yet. But now let's just go to the tabletop and take a good close look at this ZUMWALT by Artisan Cutlery. Coming at you right now. Well, one of the first things a lot of people want to know is what kind of steel is on this blade? Well, this guy is D2. They do have versions with M390 and S35VN. Of course, those are going to cost more. But so you got D2 steel, flat G10 handle scales, very little bit of milling on the handle here. Let me focus the camera here again. And as you can see right there, there's just a slight chamfer down there, very slight chamfer up here, and then the chamfer that we had back here is sort of repeated up here, sort of kitty corner. And of course, both sides have the same thing. I like these big, wide screws. I don't know why. I always like big, wide pivot screw heads. Like I said, I don't really know why. Pocket clip is a deep carry pocket clip. As you can see, it's one of those fold over kind. And those have pros and cons. I really wish everybody who uses these kind would use the flat recessed screws, because sometimes the pants get caught up in that zone and they don't go all the way deep. Got a nice triangle shaped lanyard hole back here. So any paracord basically is going to fit through there. And here's the screws for the pocket clip on the opposite side, so it's right and left friendly. The texture on the G10 here on this flat surface, mildly aggressive, good grip, feels really nice. The general shape of this knife, is like mini handles. It's just sort of a sweeping down across the back, bit of an arch, except for it's using straight lines here, so pivot point right there, or transition point right there, so flat, and then it comes down a little bit, and it helps to fit into the curvature of the hand of the palm right there. And now the finger choil here is done the same kind of way, except for, they've cut it out in angled lines instead of a nice curve, and it's quite big. That may or may not be an issue for some people. And then another change in direction right here. It's sort of got that general feel, except for it's angular. On the back here, we've got two different angles. So it's all kind of angles up here. And then on the blade, we've got sweeping lines. So it's kind of a two themes in one. Some people will find this to be a little bit odd looking because of that. So what we have here is we've got soft edges, like the transition point of the bevel where it meets the flat. A lot of knives have a nice crisp line right there, but this one's sort of been sanded so it's rounded over, so it's a little bit more gradual. Let's get you a close-up of that. So there you can see that. It's just sort of, it's not a definite crisp line right there. Same thing on the spine of the blade. It's just sort of rounded over ever so slightly. We've got sort of an oblong hole here for texture, for deploying the blade, if you want to do it with your thumb that way. And sort of a bit of a fuller right here. That's the only straight line other than the logo on this blade section. Drop point right here, so it's a sort of a belly shape, a recurve kind of shape, and then a belly. The blade is all belly, so a lot of curves and lines, and then lots of straight lines and angles over here. Kind of interesting. We've got a nice choil here that's a little bit bigger than it needs to be for sharpening purposes, but it's a little too small for a forward choil. So I find that just a little bit odd. You know, you can't really put your finger in there without cutting the corner of your finger or the edge of your finger, but it's quite big. I think I would prefer if they would have made the choil either larger to put a forward choil in, or make it smaller so it just comes and ends where the end of the plunge ends. So another 1/8 of an inch at least, another 3, maybe even 4 millimeters of cutting edge is what we could have had there. That's not a big deal. It says right there that's made in China. And then up top here, we've got what the model number is, but they're using the words SER for serial. And even on some advertising, you see that it says serial number, but no, that's model number 1808P with D2 steel. And that's the general handle. There's no jimping anywhere except for right there. You got 3 little jimps. It's just got a tiny bit right there for the light switch method, and the light switch method works great with this knife. Let's focus on a little bit lower here. Let's do that again. So we've got that jimping on the flipper tab, and it's on the very front. It's almost a vertical line right there. It's a little bit of an angle going back. And so for the light switch method, where I pull straight back, works just fine to deploy the blade. But I can just push on a slight angle back, and the same thing happens. You see my finger went straight down instead of all the way back. Oh, almost straight down. So works great that way. The action's very good. We've got ceramic ball bearings. We've got a really nice ceramic detent ball in there. Lockup is totally solid, and it's exactly where I like a brand new knife to have the lockup on a liner lock. And when you close the knife, it's almost perfectly centered. It's a little bit off to this side, which is very, very common. There we have that sort of reverse H shape, sort of like a Z for their logo. That's pretty much the essence of the shape of this knife. How does it feel in hand? It actually feels pretty good. This forward section actually fits 2 fingers in my hand. My hands are almost extra large. They're just in the men's large. It's a little bit too big for that. I think that most people will find that they can put 2 fingers in there. Now, if you've got extra large hands, big, beefy, chunky ones, you're only going to want to put your index finger in there and your other fingers, your other 3 back here, and you can get a pretty good grip that way. If you want a long reach, you can use this corner of this forward choil, put your finger in there, and get a good strong grip. I do miss the feeling of having something on here, like maybe just a little bit of jimping, or maybe a little bit of a relief cut so that your thumb can sink in there a little bit. But, it's got none of that. It's not a big deal, though. Quite comfortable in hand. If I'm gripping it back here, my pinky does get a little irritated. It gets a little bit of a hot spot right there on that pocket clip. Now, I have used this to do a fair bit of cutting, and yeah, that does get annoying right there unless I stay cinched up. If I stay close to the pivot with my hand, then my pinky is at a different spot, over here, and it's not as bad. That's with my left hand. With my right hand, no problem at all because the pocket clip's not there. And any way I hold it is pretty good, except for when I'm back here. Now, this spot of my hand gets irritated by the end of the pocket clip. So the pocket clip, there's something about the placement on here, and I just can't quite put my finger on it, but it's a little bit odd for my hands to have my hand over there. When I moved the pocket clip over to the left-hand side, I didn't have any of those problems, either right or left hand. So it's kind of odd. Maybe I'm a strange bird. I don't know. But, you know, it's a relatively good knife. And unless you're going to do a lot of extended use and your hands are exactly like mine, probably neither of those apply to you. But if you are, you might want to consider a different knife or carry it in such a way that you don't need the pocket clip. When the pocket clip's all the way off, I found this knife very, very comfortable indeed. And I do carry some knives, you know, just in the bottom of my pocket, or I use a belt sheath, you know, like the typical old school Buck 110, you know, you get your leather pocket and you slide the knife in, that kind of sheath. I do carry my knives that way. I know not a lot of people do that, but I do carry knives that way every once in a while. And this one carries very well that way. So here on the blade, this shape here that's been recessed out, it looks like it's been bead blasted in there, and same with the fuller, looks like it's been bead blasted. So probably the whole knife was bead blasted and then it was sanded smooth. And that's why we've got these nice transition smooth points here. Because if you're taking off sanding after the bead blasting, it's going to be really hard to keep nice crisp edges. You're going to have to take off too much steel. It's just easier to smooth it off. And so that's why that's there. It's a kind of odd look if you ask me, but it's functional to deploy the blade if you want to. You know, it's not, oh, I'm way off screen. It's not hard to deploy the blade with your thumb. The weight of this knife is 154 grams. That's 4.45 ounces, so almost 5.5 ounces. When I show you the insides of the knife, and I'll do that after the scales and everything, it's the skeletonizing. It could use more skeletonizing. The factory edge sharpness is 185. Not bad. The cutting edge from tip to the sharpness choil here, 9.15 centimeters, 3.6 inches. The blade length from the tip to the closest spot on the handle is 9.76 centimeters, 3.84 inches. So just a little bit under a 4-inch knife. The blade thickness is 3.8 millimeters. That's 0.1495. So a good chunky piece of steel here, although it doesn't look like it is, but yeah, it's a nice stout piece of steel. The blade depth, that's this dimension, and I usually go about an inch up from where the cutting edge is, about 2.5 centimeters, and that is 2.35 centimeters, 0.927 inches. The thickness of the edge, the cutting edge right here behind the grind, is 0.68 millimeters, which is 0.027 inches. So it's a little bit thicker here than I would like. I would like the cutting edge to come a little bit thinner before it terminates at that sharp edge. The grind angle. Sorry, Artisan Cutlery, you didn't do this one that well. If I'd measure it again at that same sweet spot, about an inch from this choil here, we've got 20.1 on this side. That's the back. So that's really good because 20 degrees is what I'm looking for. On this side, it's about 25.8 right there. But the bigger problem is, or the bigger issue is, the grind angle changes quite a lot. And it changes a lot along this length of the blade. So right here on this side, it's a little more shallow, gets a little steeper, and then gets shallow again here. On this side, it's very steep here. Gets a little more shallow, and even more shallow. And here it's more like 16 degrees at the tip. So almost 30 degrees right there, down to 16 here. But it just happens to be at that sweet 20 degrees right at that spot where we tend to cut the most. So this knife, when the first time I'm going to sharpen this, I'm going to have to take off more steel than I really want to. And it's already thick behind the grind. So that is something that you'd want to consider when you're buying this knife. chances are you might get a knife that has the same conditions that mine does. Hopefully you don't, but at least this one will be nice and sharp when I'm done with it. Now let's talk about the handle. The handle length is 12.83 centimeters. That's 5.05 inches. The grip area back here is nice and big, 10.5 centimeters, 4.13 inches. The handle thickness, not counting the pocket clip, is 1.36 centimeters. That's 0.535 inches. Very standard to have it right around half an inch. The handle depth, it's biggest right here, 2.64 centimeters, 1.04 inches. And when you close the knife, the biggest spot is right here. I don't count flipper tabs usually when I'm doing this, but the biggest spot's right there, 3.34 centimeters, 1.31 inches. And the total length of this knife, when the blade is deployed, 22.7 centimeters, 8.94. So basically 8.9. And that's a pretty big size knife. Now let me show you some of the pictures of what this knife is like on the inside. So if they would have done a little more skeletonizing, then I could get a balance point around here. But right now the balance point is, where is it? Let me find it again, right there. And I would like the balance point to be, a little closer to the pivot. And if they would have taken out a bit more steel, they could have made those circles bigger, or they could have added a couple more, and that would have remedied that. Not that big of a deal, though. I don't mind this weight for this knife, and the balance really isn't that far off. At White Mountain Knives and most other places, the prices are very close to the same, but without the extra 10% off with the coupon code CCE for White Mountain Knives. Just throwing that in there. I don't get any money back from them from any sales. I get no income that way. But he's willing to sell the knives to me at a lower price the more customers I bring to his store. So if you want the knife and you like my video, please use my links. And if you like other knives there, use the coupon code anyways. It works for any knife in the store. $52.50, basically. $15.49. $52.49 is what this costs. That's US dollars. The equivalent of those prices in Canadian, that's between 70 and 300. In euros, it's between 46 and 200. And in pounds, it's between 40 and 170. But unfortunately, everywhere outside of the United States ends up having to pay more for knives than Americans do. So you've got all your taxes and all the extra, price increases for whatever reasons if you live outside of the United States of America. So what are the pros and cons of this? Well, I've gone over some of them, but not in an organized list. The pros: right and left hand pocket clip, pro. Good lanyard hole in a good spot, pro. Back spacers, very well made. I haven't talked about that yet. It's very easy to clean around it, well done, and the fit and finish of it is great. I don't mind that at all. That's a pro. The grip is fairly comfortable, except for this hot spot. So that's a pro and a con, depending on how you're going to use the knife. And some more of the cons are, I wish there was a little more tactile engagement with the liner lock. And I haven't talked about that at all. What do I mean by that? Well, the liner lock doesn't stick out very far from the side of the handle, and it's just sort of smooth. And sometimes, especially when I first got it, I would try to unlock the knife and I wouldn't slide the liner lock over. And now, even now after I've had it for a while, sometimes when I slide the liner lock over, it's a little uncomfortable. I have to push harder than I want to because I've got a smaller spot to push on. It takes more pressure at that spot. So I can always do it now, but it's not enjoyable. I really wish it was more enjoyable, because then this would become more of a knife that I'd be willing to, to flick back and forth, open and closed with. So the way to remedy that is there's two options. One would be at the factory, make the liner lock arm here just a little bit bigger. The other option that you might want to deploy, engage with, I probably wouldn't anyways, and that's to take off some material here and just come down, not even 1/8 of an inch, maybe a 1/16, and just take off about a 1/16 of an inch right along here. And then it's going to be more roomy for you to get into that liner lock. Another con is the place where the knife hits the detent ball when you're closing it. So I've unlocked it, and I'm pushing the knife over, and right there, the tang of the blade, where it locks up, is meeting the detent ball on the liner arm. And since that detent is so engaging, it takes a fair bit to push it over. And I wish it was a little bit softer. That's an easy solution once you know how to do it. You just take off a little bit of steel on the back of the tang and make just a very tiny ramp. I might do a video on that sometime soon. If enough people are interested in that and want me to make a video on how to make the closing of the knife a little bit smoother, specifically about the point where the detent ball hits the tang of the blade while you're closing it. So if you want that, let me know in the comments below. The only other very, very minor con is, I was mentioning, the balance point. So they could have skeletonized a little bit more, basically. So they could have made this a bit lighter, but it's only 5.5 ounces, well, under 5.5 ounces. For a 9-inch knife, that's not a big deal. That's nothing to really complain about at all. I like this knife. Would I recommend buying it? Maybe. If you really like the styling and stuff, you know, if this thing's very attractive to you, yeah, there's no huge problems with it. There's nothing major that I'd say, you know, it's a deal breaker. You know, there's just a few minor things that make me say you really do need to love the styling if you want to buy this knife. And that's my recommendation for this knife. So thanks for watching my videos. Thanks for liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. And remember, guys, always cut towards your chum, not your thumb.